We talk Pierre Luc Dubois, the Edmonton Oilers, trade rumors, and more on this fan feedback edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We would love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Before we get into the emails and a fan feedback show, let's check in on today's LA Kings news. That will now conclude the news portion of the show. There was no news involving the LA Kings or even indirectly involving the LA Kings in any way. So that gives us more time to share your feedback, which is what we're going to do right now. And we start with an email from John in Valencia. And John wrote a lengthy email. I have, unfortunately, John, had to edit it down a bit. I have, I believe, gotten your major points that you had from your email. But I appreciate the efforts that you put into that very lengthy email. Thank you for that. I read every word of it. And again, appreciate the time you put into it. But we're going to get to John's email, the abridged version of John's email, as he touches on a lot of different topics. But John says, I am flustered with the front office and the lack of direction. On the Hiller hiring, I understand that you have to give the coach some stability, but I would not have pushed for more than 2 years at a discount rate. I'm absolutely lost on this Newell Brown hiring. The guy has not shown anything to me over his career. Definitely a journeyman type of guy coming off a bad season. I have to believe that Rob Blake is on a very short leash and would hope that Luc Robitaille also gets a call to come into the principal's office to discuss both the direction of the team on the ice and the message being sent to the fan base. As far as Pierre Luc Dubois goes, we are in full agreement about him not really being given a chance to be successful, and that is not to take anything away from the blame that must be put directly on him. That said, if you make a major trade like that and the guy is playing on the third and fourth line, that's not going to work. He should have been given the 2C position with top six forwards. My belief is that Danault's signing was actually more of a third line, and he says defense and some scoring. The signing of Danault he's talking about now was more of a third line defense and some scoring center than a number 2 center. I think him as a 3C would be a huge strength to the team. He is talented and can continue to develop players like Laferriere playing on his right side. And there is time to get him an impact left winger as well. I think it is time to move on from Blake Lizotte and get a Rain fourth line, keep that intact and allow them to develop to a top level. Give the second center position to PLD and Danault on the third line center position. Victor Arvidsson is allowed to walk unless he wants to take a downgraded contract. I think the same with Matt Roy. Trevor Lewis should play a year at home in Utah. Quentin Byfield, Jordan Spence, and Alex Turcotte are givens, which leaves Carl Grundstrom and Blake Lizotte. Grundstrom looked pretty good at the Worlds and could possibly be a grinder on the left side on the third line. I would love to see Kaliev given a legitimate chance, maybe with Dubois on the second line. Actually, that would be the second line. He says, I think we need to look at the Doughty situation. Obviously, he is in decline. He had a nice year this past season, but 50 points does not lead up to $11 million. That is hurting the team for sure. As much as I want to see him finish his career as a King, we cannot live with that contract. So either we ask for a restructure or we possibly look to move him. It's time for Clark to take that second line right pairing defensive spot and let him loose. I'm good with the Rittich signing. He's definitely a better option as a backup. As we all know, Portillo needs another year in Ontario. We can't rush him. What do you think of trying to pry a top AHL goalie from some of these other teams? I know It's not regularly done. What if Nashville re-signed Soros? Could we get Askarov or maybe Casa from Detroit? I've been a diehard Kings fan since the third or fourth year of existence as I was a little kid. I would love to have the original uniforms back. I know a lot of people love the chevron with the Raiders colors from when Gretzky got here, but the original crown and the colors, the gold, the yellow, the all forum blue, are very unique. I loved watching the original 6 teams as they have pretty much kept the original jerseys. Again, that was a lot to chew on from our guy, John, in Valencia. And again, John, thank you so much for the email. So to touch on some of your topics, I do agree with a lot of what you had to say. As far as Matt Roy, you talked about Victor Arvidsson coming back on a team-friendly deal possibly, and Matt Roy as well. Matt Roy is not going to do that. Maybe Arvidsson might. He might do that. Kind of a prove-it deal if he doesn't get a lot of good offers from other teams. I don't think that's going to happen, but I could see that. Matt Roy's not going to do that, nor should he. He's going to get paid. This is a chance to get out there on the open market and see what he's worth. I think some team's going to give him a really good contract and a lot more than the Kings are going to be able to give him. So he's not going to give the LA Kings any kind of team-friendly deal, like I said, nor should he. He's earned it. As far as Drew Doughty renegotiating or restructuring, that's not allowed in the NHL. We talked about this on a feedback show a few months ago. It was brought up as well. The way the collective bargaining agreement was bargained, that is not allowed in the NHL because you have guaranteed contracts. The NFL, no guaranteed contracts, so you can and do see players restructure their contracts, sometimes at the request, well, always at the request of the teams. But like, for example, Tom Brady would restructure his contract all the time. Now, he would still get his money, but he would get it in a different way so that it could free up cap space and money for them to re-sign players or sign players, that kind of thing. That doesn't happen in the NHL. So the only way that the Kings could get rid of Drew Doughty would be either to trade him or to buy him out. He's going to get that money regardless of where he's at. Now, he also, if you're talking about trading him, he has a modified no trade clause. So he has some say in where he would be traded if the Kings were looking to do that. And frankly, I don't believe the Kings want to do that, and I don't believe Drew Doughty wants that. The only way I could see a Drew Doughty trade is if the Kings went to him and said, Drew, we're rebuilding. And there are other teams out there, contending teams, that are interested in a veteran defenseman with Stanley Cup experience to pick him up, for a Stanley Cup run. Would you agree to be traded? I think in that scenario he would, but I don't see that happening. And let's be honest, he still is a very productive player. I understand he's not worth $11 million, but as far as you look at the contracts that the Kings are not happy with at this point, I don't think Drew Doughty's is at the top of the list. Plus, I mean, how would that go over with the fan base? Pretty awful. If you thought people were upset about Jonathan Quick, who wasn't playing well at the time and got traded away, how about trading away a Stanley Cup hero, the greatest defenseman in Kings history, and you're trading him away when he's still playing well? That's just not, it's not going to happen. What else? Talking about trying to get some top AHL goalies. If you're going to do that, then you're going to have to give up a lot. If the Kings were to get Askarov from Nashville, who's the heir apparent and by all signs is going to be a great goalie in the NHL in the near future, what do you got to give up to get that guy? You got to give up Quentin Byfield. You got to give up Brant Clark and something else, draft picks as well. The Kings really want to do that? I would say no. So, like I said, right now, I think the Kings are looking to fill in the goalie position with likely a veteran guy, considering where they are right now, as far as a team, being a playoff team, or even on the, still, I think next season, even with the issues, I think they're still probably a playoff team, or at least battling for a wild card spot. So that's not, you don't want to go out and get some young, unproven goalie and hope that maybe you find some diamond in the rough. So I don't see that happening as well. And I will say some of the things I do agree with you on. I absolutely agree. Pierre Luc Dubois should be the second line center and Philip Deneau the third line center next year. I do agree with you that it's time for Brant Clark to be a full-time NHLer. And I definitely agree with you on the forum blue and gold old uniforms coming back. So there's a lot of things I do agree with you on. A lot of good points, good stuff there, John, in Valencia. Definitely appreciate that email. We've got more emails to come. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect them against the unknowns. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million in coverage. Some options are 100% online, and you can avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Policygenius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. All right, our next email comes from John E. Jesse, and he is in Plumas Lake. Plumas Lake. This is from John. He says, great idea for your follow-up to the Kings' sad playoff ousting. Do I still hate the Oilers? Yes, unequivocally, go Panthers, go. That said, as someone who has been a fan for a very long time and truly appreciates the game, a very small part of me would like to see future Hall of Famers like McDavid and Draisaitl get their names in the cup. I'd feel wrong, or it would feel wrong for players of that caliber to never hoist the cup, though it has happened plenty of times. Marcel Dion, Henrik Lundqvist, Matt Sundin, Joe Thornton, Jerome McGinley, the list goes on. I remember how pleased I was when Alexander Ovechkin got the cup, though I wasn't rooting for the Capitals. And that was from John. And I get where you're coming from, John. I would say when Ovechkin won the cup, I thought that was pretty cool. I was a huge Jerome McGinley fan. I was thrilled when he finished out his career with the Kings. I was always a big fan of his, even though he played in the division with the Flames most of the time. But I for me personally, right now, and certainly our recent history as Kings fans with the Edmonton Oilers, prevents me from looking at the bigger picture and taking a broad view that you have. I cannot find myself right now rooting for Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl to win a Stanley Cup. So I will say go Panthers as far as the Stanley Cup final. But I would say I understand where you're coming from, but for me personally, it's not. I can't go there at this point. Our next email comes from Mason. He's in Gilbert, Arizona. He says, "Hey Eddie, with the finals set, the Oilers and the Panthers, I'm really praying for the downfall of the Oilers. Losing to them 3 times in a row has been tough. First 7, then 6, now 5. What makes it worse is that their success seems to hinge almost entirely on McDavid with a sprinkle of Draisaitl. If the Oilers don't win the cup this year, hopefully they lose. Do you think McDavid might want out? If so, why? And how much of an impact do you think it would have? Or if not, why? And how long do you think he'll stay? Thanks for keeping me up to date with the Kings. Go Kings, go." And again, that was from Mason in Gilbert, Arizona. Well, I would say this year, certainly McDavid is driving the engine and Draisaitl is still phenomenal. But I have to admit, grudgingly, the Oilers have really gotten a lot of contributions from a lot of other players. It's not just McDavid and Draisaitl, because that's what it was in the past, and it wasn't working. And now that they've gotten other players to contribute, Evan Bouchard has become almost an elite defenseman for them. Zach Hyman has become a great goal scorer. So they've got other guys that are really chipping in, and other guys that play roles, Matthias Ekholm, guys like that. So they've turned into more than just the McDavid and Draisaitl show, and got to give credit where credit is due. As far as, as Kings fans, do we hope that maybe things don't go their way and maybe McDavid wants out or Draisaitl? Look, Draisaitl's a UFA after next season, and McDavid's a UFA the season after that. Now, do I think the Oilers are going to sign both of them? Absolutely. Do I think they're probably going to both finish their careers in Edmonton? Yeah, I think so. Now, had the Oilers lost in the second round this year, I could see Draisaitl maybe deciding, I'm going to try it with somewhere else because it's not working here. But that hasn't been the case. I think they've all gotten a lot of hope over the way the team's played and how other players have emerged. And again, it's not just the 2 stars. So wishful thinking, I would say that Draisaitl and McDavid are looking to leave anytime soon. I think they're both going to get re-signed. I think, like I said, I think they're both likely going to finish their careers as Edmonton Oilers and go into the Hall of Fame as Edmonton Oilers stars, unfortunately. This comes from Gary in Orange. He says, my friend Mark, who's a Ducks fan, said he thinks the Kings will be a lottery team sometime within the next 3 years. He made the comment 2 months ago before the playoffs started. I think some Kings fans are feeling this way these days, given the fact that we appear to be slowly moving backwards as a franchise. Any thoughts on this? He also says, I've noticed during the playoffs that almost every team is using 4 forwards and 1 defenseman on their power plays. I can't remember the last time the Kings have tried this. I feel like it would improve our chances to score a goal with the 4-and-1 format, especially during crucial times in the regular season and for every postseason game. He also says, are you going to the NHL draft at the end of the month in Las Vegas? First of all, your Ducks friend making a comment that the Kings would be a lottery team within the next 3 years. It's not really quite the slight that it might seem. The bottom 16 teams in the NHL are in the draft lottery every year. The St. Louis Blues were in the draft lottery. They missed the playoffs by 6 points. The Kings were 7 points better than the St. Louis Blues. So could the Kings in the next 3 years regress 7 points less than they were this season? Something like that? Sure, that could happen. But I will say this for our friends who are Ducks fans out there, I think it's likely that the next 3 years, the Anaheim Ducks are in the draft lottery every one of those 3 years. As for the Kings power play, they actually have used the 4 forward, 1 defenseman setup all year. And I think they did it last year as well. So Drew Doughty is the only defenseman out there on the Kings' number 1 penalty unit. And last year, it was Jordan Spence, the only defenseman out there on the 2nd power play unit. So the Kings do have that 4 forward, 1 defenseman setup on their power plays. As far as the draft lottery, I'd love to go to Vegas and see the Sphere, which is where the draft lottery is going to be. I don't think that's going to be the case. That's not 100%, but I say right now, likely I will not be attending the NHL draft. But it's not, the door isn't completely shut on that, but it doesn't look so good. This comes from Scott in Simi Valley, who's a regular emailer. He says, great show with Carl Balikian this week. I enjoyed and respected his opinions on Pierre Luc Dubois and everything else, but I can't agree with all I'm hearing across social media as far as what the Kings should do about Pierre Luc Dubois, how they should use him. It doesn't matter if PLD plays well in Team Canada or any other jersey than the Kings. As Jim Fox said recently, when you're getting paid $8.5 million, or actually I think he gets more than $11 million next season, you don't wait for your team to make you better. You make the players around you better. What surprises and disgusts me is all I hear about prospective trades for PLD. Everyone is pushing trades where teams trade 2 bad apples for each other. Why? Why would anyone want a brain larger than a sparrow, or why would anyone with a brain larger than a sparrow trade one problem for another? Why do these people think we should trade PLD for Jonathan Huberdeau? Huberdeau makes more money than PLD. There seems to be a fog some people are in over the subject, and they like to propose a stiff wind of common sense to clear the air. Trade PLD for 2nd and 3rd round picks with as little salary retention as possible. This assumes that a team would be interested in such a deal, and I believe that there would be. The Kings have no 2nd and 3rd rounders in the upcoming draft, so this makes perfect sense. And sense seems to be a rare commodity these days when it comes to dealing with Pierre Luc Dubois, the debacle of Pierre Luc Dubois. Well, PLD will make $8.5 million for the next 7 years. He's not going to make $11 million, thank God. I agree with some of the sentiment that you've said. I would not trade Pierre Luc Dubois for Jonathan Huberdeau. But there is a lot of that sentiment that gets rehashed by a lot of different people about when you've got 2 underachieving players on different teams, the thinking is, well, if you swap them, get them on new teams with new teammates, new systems, a breath of fresh air, maybe that'll be the thing that turns them both around and you could have 2 successful players. It rarely seems to work that way, frankly. But there is a lot of that kind of discussion out there. But I think clearly Rob Blake still believes that they can have the Pierre-Luc Dubois that they traded for, and they're going to give him every chance to do that next season. So I don't see the Kings trading him for a couple of draft picks, but I certainly understand why the great majority of us are all in the I'll believe it when I see it mindset when it comes to Pierre-Luc Dubois. We have some more emails to share with you here on this Kings Fan Feedback Friday. That's next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets to NBA, NHL, or whatever sports you're into. I have bought tickets using Gametime to NFL and NHL games this past season, and I am a satisfied customer. The app is easy to use and easy to navigate. Just go on there and tap on the listings, sports, music, shows, or whatever you're looking for, and they will list the tickets with the best deals. When you search for tickets for those events, those searches will be saved. So when you go back and check again, find out what the prices are, if they're going up or down. My favorite feature is getting the panoramic view from your seat so you can see the exact view from that seat that you might buy when you go to the app. And you can also get the lowest prices guaranteed, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Our next email comes from Jeremiah in Hawthorne, and apparently his dad did not send an email this week, so it's just the son. He says, what do you think about Cohen Zemer? Do you think we can see him one day in the AHL and maybe hopefully with the Kings in the near future? So Jeremiah is asking about one of the Kings' recent draft picks. That would be Cohen Zemer, who was a third-round pick of the Kings last year. He's 19 years old. He just finished up his fourth season playing for Prince George in the Western Hockey League. Unfortunately, got hurt early in the season, had to have ankle surgery. He did return late in the year, played 23 games, had 11 goals and 31 points. However, the season before that was the year that caught a lot of people's attention. 41 goals, 89 points in 68 games. He finished 7th in the Western Hockey League in goal scoring, and that prompted the Kings to sign him to a 3-year entry-level deal. Now, he does turn 20 before December 31st, so that means he's eligible to play in the AHL next season, but he could also play in the Western Hockey League for another year as well. So he and the Kings have a decision to make. I would think the Kings would like Cohen Zemer to return to junior for another season. Hopefully he's injury-free, puts up numbers like he did season before last, and then after that season makes the jump to the AHL. That way the Kings also can free up a spot with the Ontario Reign to try and develop another player as well. So that's what I would do. I don't know what the Kings are going to do. My guess is they would probably lean that way as well. So to answer your question, Jeremiah, Cohen Zemer is it's not a surefire prospect, but showing a lot of great signs at the junior level. Got great scoring touch. I hear he's a demon in the faceoff circle. There's a lot of good things to like about him. But again, 2 years ago, great numbers. If he can duplicate that again next season, that could jumpstart him into kicking off his professional career the season after that. And if you're ever interested in some of these guys, go to the development camp the Kings have every year in the summer. He'll be there, and you can see him with your own eyes at the Toyota Sports Center. It's free to get in. I know it's during the day, so sometimes that doesn't work out for people. But if you're really interested and you can do it, I highly suggest go down, check out the development camp. You can see these guys with your own eyes and make your own judgments on what kind of players they are. This comes from Jacob, and he doesn't give his exact location, but he says he's on the east coast of the Canadian Atlantic. So look, Jacob, I'm a geography fan, and I love when we get emails from Kings fans in interesting places. So what are we talking about? Are we talking about Halifax, St. John's? Give me next time you email the show, and I hope you email again. Let me know exactly where you are, because I'm curious, even if it's a place that probably most of us have never heard of. But Jacob says, it's not often I get a chance to connect with people and talk about the Kings. Now that the Kaliev trade is a near guarantee to happen, there's one name that seemingly will be available, and I'm curious to see what other Kings fans may think. That's Capo Kakko, the 2019 second overall pick. And he's a player who has struggled immensely to keep up and produce with the New York Rangers system, and routinely ends up being benched in both the regular season and the playoffs. However, despite this, he has still shown a respectable defensive game. With Kakko being available as a pending restricted free agent, how would we feel about a swap of the rights of him and Kaliev? He says, is it likely that Blake would have? It's likely that Blake would have to add a little bit to sweeten the pot, but I don't believe it would cost any more than a third or a fourth if this were the price of the signing rights for a former second overall pick who has been widely considered a bust since his draft, and could the only And could the only still 23-year-old see a potential career revival with a team like LA? If this were to go through, these would be my ideal lines. He says he would put Deneau and Laferriere with Capo Caco. He says, maybe it's just me, but I strongly feel like Caco could benefit from being in a place in the LA Kings defensive structure and learn a lot from Deneau. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts and possibly the thoughts of others as well. So this is kind of what we were talking about with Scott's email. A lot of people like to throw out these trades of underperforming guys who were, well, certainly Capo Caco was picked a lot higher than Arthur Kaliev. But there's similar players, right? For whatever reason, it hasn't worked out where they are. Swap these guys. Maybe it works out for Kaliev in New York. Maybe it works out for Caco in Los Angeles. So it's, again, that's that. A lot of people love to have those examples. So I would say personally no to Capo Caco, especially if I have to include something else in the deal, like a third-round pick. Capo Caco had 19 points last season. He had one more point than Mikey Anderson, just to give it some context. Yes, he was thought to be a very highly thought of draft pick. They thought he would be obviously a top 6 forward for sure. Hasn't turned out that way. So it's that getting someone else's trash and hoping to turn it into a treasure. Maybe trash is a little bit strong, but you know what I'm saying. So it's a fun idea, and I'm not opposed to throwing these things out there and getting thoughts. But I personally would not look to bring Capo Caco in. But yeah, if he goes somewhere else, gets a better shot, maybe kind of like Pierre Luc Dubois, maybe he gets slotted in on a team that can afford to play him in a top 6 role because they're rebuilding, and then he flourishes. It could happen. Our final email comes from Edwin in Brea, who's kind of become the closer here on our fan feedback shows because he emails every week, and he always is the last guy to send an email. He emails on Fridays. So he says, as a Kings fan, this year's Stanley Cup is the most displeasing pair for us, the Oilers and Panthers. Many Kings fans may root for Florida, which I won't be surprised, but I can't root for Matthew Tkachuk, even if it's against McDavid and the Oilers. He says, you mentioned Kirill Velmelka. My honest opinion is he's an affordable upgrade starter and potential all-star. Utah had a not-so-good team, so he faced a lot of shots on goal. I do believe if he plays behind a manageable defense and a better team that has solid potential, that he could be an all-star. Connor Ingram is a better talent there. He says, also, is it official the Kings are – it is official. The Kings are returning to their 90s sweaters and logo, same colors with the modern style. What is interesting – our SoCal rivals, the Duckies, are also doing the same thing with their original logos. However, their colors will remain orange, black, and white. So next season, SoCal will be throwback to the 90s. He says, play some Snoop Dogg and some Spice Girls. Yeah, I mean, look, if you want to pick the root for the Oilers over the Panthers because you hate Matthew Tkachuk, I get that. But I think you answered your own question, though, about Kirill Velmelka, because Connor Ingram is the number 1 goalie in Arizona. He played very well for the Coyotes, and the same team that Velmelka was playing behind. And Velmelka didn't put up the numbers, lost his starting job to Connor Ingram. So I'm not sold on Kirill Velmelka being a solid NHL number 1 goalie. Like I said, I'm curious to see what he could do on another team, but I don't want that team to be the Kings. I don't want the Kings to gamble and try and find out what this guy could become. So thank you to everyone who took the time to email. Really appreciate it. Obviously, this show literally is not possible without your participation. So thank you very much for everyone who took the time to email. As far as connecting with the show, the email address is always lockedoneddie, EDDIE, @gmail.com. If you want to participate in a future Kings fan feedback show. And also love to stay interactive with us on social media. We are on X and Twitter and Instagram at Locked on LA Kings. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked on LA Kings every day, coming up on Monday, we'll recap all the news, if there is any, from the weekend involving the Kings. Wednesday, we'll have a special guest. And then, of course, Friday, we'll have our typical fan feedback show. In between, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we'll have some player profiles and update you on any of the latest Kings news, maybe some signings coming up next week. And also, we'll start to get into the NHL draft as well. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked on LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. And as always, go Kings, go.